Thanks, Jim. Love you.
All right.
You know, thanks, you guys. The purple hair story was funny because it was at the first night of an investor cruise, and I'd heard about Jim and Cheryl for years, but I'd never met them in person. And we're all assigned tables the first night of dinner, and so I sit across from Jim, and I think Cheryl was on my right, and I was dressed up in a funky get-up with this wig. Obviously, I do not have straight hair, and I do not have long hair, so I had this wig, and we had this great conversation for like 2 hours. And the next day, I'm walking with my normal hair, and I see Jim in the hall. I'm like, "Hey, Jim," and he's like, do I know you? And I'm like, "It's Mary. We had 2 hours of dinner." He goes, "I thought that was your real hair." I'm like, "Nope. No, I wish. It was very cool, but no, I cannot do that. Cannot do that." Well, thank you, Jim, for having me again and for inviting me to be the keynote speaker for the second time. This is my favorite event of the year. It's the one I try to make almost every year, and I was looking at Jim's timeline, and I think I have spoken at almost every one, maybe 2 or 3 that I've missed out of the years, and so I love to come back to Richmond for this, and so excited to see a lot of familiar faces in the room. This is a huge crowd, you guys. Give yourself a hand for being here. This is awesome. Awesome. So for my friends in the room, I can't wait to catch up, share a cocktail. For those of you I don't know, I'd really love to meet you. So if you see me in the hall, introduce yourself, because I like to make new friends. And I live on the farm in the middle of nowhere in Kentucky. We don't even have a stoplight, literally. So I don't have a chance to meet new people very often. So come introduce yourself. All right, and Jim, what a great community you've built, and thank you for that. So let's see, where am I? And I'm going to be scrolling a little bit through here because I did not memorize my talk, but I wanted to make sure I hit everything that I've been thinking about since Jim asked me to do this. So I apologize if I look down a little bit, but I just want to make sure I'm hitting everything I want to hit. So when Jim asked me to talk today about legacy, and by the way, the title of my presentation I'm calling Your Living Legacy, and you'll understand that when I get done. And if I talk too fast, Ashley, I need a secret signal, okay? Because I do have the moniker of lightning lips and lightning legs because I talk fast and I walk fast. And nobody can believe I'm from the South. So secret signal if I talk too fast. Okay, so when Jim asked me to talk about legacy today, my estate planning lawyer brain immediately went to our financial legacy, right? The stuff, the assets that we build up and then leave to people at death. And so I started to prepare this presentation about estate planning and charitable giving and all the ways we can leave all this money that you guys are generating to other people. But as I sat down to write this presentation, my brain just was really struggling with that, and it kept pulling me somewhere else, and I couldn't get the words to come out of my fingers. And I just didn't know what was going on. I've been giving this talk many, many times about estate planning and charitable giving and whatnot. So after struggling to prepare that talk for quite a while, I realized that I was struggling because I wanted to talk about something that was so much bigger than just our financial legacy, right? Our financial legacy is super important, no doubt. That's very, very important. We're all here to create wealth, hopefully generational wealth to support our descendants, to support the causes that we love, but it's only a piece of our legacy with a capital L, right? So I'm thinking of financial legacy in little letters and our true legacy with a capital L. And I think that the financial legacy is actually the easiest piece of your legacy to accomplish, right? It's pretty easy in the grand scheme of things. It takes work, but the mechanics of it are not that hard, right? You generate wealth. That's why you guys are all here, right? You keep as much of that wealth as possible. We'll talk more about that. And you purposefully and thoughtfully pass that wealth on at death. That's financial legacy. And that just takes some steps and some know-how, but it's not that complicated. And we don't have enough time today, because of what my brain wants me to talk about, to go into depth about all of those things. I know on some of the tax-free investing, you've got Derek Long and Jeff Watson. I think you're going to talk about that a little bit. So I'm just going to touch briefly, really briefly, on the financial legacy, and then I'm going to move on. So generating wealth, that's a no-brainer. You're probably already generating wealth, or if you're here and you're not generating wealth, you will be by this afternoon, right? Because that's why you're here. Keeping as much of your wealth as possible. There are really 3 components in my mind to this one. One, Jim touched on in terms of living beneath your means. Don't overspend, right? Don't go crazy. Don't go buy the fancy cars that you have massive car payments for. Don't buy a house that's too big with a massive mortgage. Don't overspend. Don't pay any more taxes than you have to pay, right? So tax avoidance is legal. Tax evasion is not. There are lots of ways to do tax avoidance, and you're going to hear about some of those ways this week. Whoever's heard me speak in here before, that's heard me talk about the magic penny, raise their hand. Anybody? Anybody? Yeah. Okay, so there are a few people. The magic penny, if I gave Ashley a penny today and said, and Ashley, it's in your Roth IRA, and I'm going to say that penny is going to double every day for 30 days. What will that penny be worth in your IRA at the end of 30 days, right? Over $5 million in 1 month, that one penny, because it's not subject to taxation. So every day it's compounding and compounding and doubling, and it's worth over $5 million. Now if I said to Ashley, you know, she hadn't gone to Quest, hadn't set up her Roth IRA, and I said, fine, I'll just give you the penny in the hallway and you do what you want to with it, but it will double every day, it's magic. Well, at the end of that 30 days, if she was in a 28% tax bracket, that penny would only be worth $67,000. $67,000, $5 million plus dollars, right? 5.3. You see the destructive power of taxation? So you want to do your best when you've passed your monthly nut you need to eat and pay your mortgage and pay your bills. Anything beyond that, do your best to invest in a tax-deferred or preferably tax-free environment. So that taxation is the second piece of your financial plan. Third piece is you want to minimize your exposure and liability for creditors, right? So you want to do some asset protection planning. You want to start early, because by the way, when a problem has arisen, or you think a problem has arisen because you've run through the stop sign and hit somebody, it is too late for asset protection. Because anything you do to avoid, delay, hinder, or defraud creditors, the court's going to undo. So if you set up a trust because you ran through the stop sign, the court can undo that. Right, Jeff Watson, you're in here, right? So anyway, start early with your asset protection planning. Do it as part of your business planning. Set up the correct structure and the correct entities, whether that's LLCs, trusts, land trusts, there are all sorts of different ways. And when you have your plan and you have everything set up, manage it properly. Now, as a lawyer for 30 plus years, I cannot tell you how many times I saw people that had beautiful LLCs on paper. That was a gorgeous operating agreement, just gorgeous. But guess what? They commingled their funds with their personal money every day. They treated it like their personal bank account. You know, they went back and forth. They just didn't manage it correctly. And so if you don't manage your entities correctly, then the court can pierce that veil of liability protection and get to your personal assets. So those talks, asset protection planning, self-directed IRA investing, I could go on for an entire day about all of this, but I just wanted to give you a quick thing. And then, of course, the third piece of your financial legacy is purposely passing on your wealth at death through a well-thought-out estate plan, right? What I like to call, some of you have heard this, your ultimate love letter. To me, that is the ultimate love letter. Not just creating the wealth, but figuring out how to get it down to the next generation. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But I believe that everybody who's 18 or older should have an estate plan. My youngest son, Jackson, is in the room. He's 22. He has two older brothers who are 27 and almost 30. When they turned 18, their birthday present was an estate plan. How boring is that for those poor guys? But hey, they're protected now. And now that they're getting older, their next birthday presents, 2 down, 1 to go. In fact, we got to find a notary. Anybody a notary in Richmond? Because I need one. I need to find you guys. Come find me because I can't see who it is. I need a notary because Jackson's got to sign his living trust this week. So my other boys now went from a basic will to a revocable living trust. So do your estate plan, include documents for disability, not just your death, and don't wait till you feel wealthy enough, because if you have one bank account or one car, you're wealthy enough to have a will. All right, let's see. So, and by the way, if anybody wants to talk more about those topics, I am easily bought with a Manhattan in the bar at the evening. Just saying, although I only have limited space, because if I have more than 2, it might be a bad thing. All right, let me ask you by a show of hands, let me go back to where I was, because I forgot to ask you this question at the beginning. I got so excited talking to Jim. All right. I'm not using the projector? So yeah, sometimes I do a PowerPoint. I really talk better without it, and this talk doesn't really lend itself as well to a PowerPoint. I appreciate that, but yes, it's blank for a reason. You guys have to look at me, all my greatness. Thank you. And by the way, I have this really fancy microphone that I've never used before, and it's really cool because I don't worry that my necklaces and things don't hit it and make funky noises. So anyway, all right. What I want to know is how many of you are in this room by a show of hands to make money and grow your real estate business? All right, yeah, okay, that's a lot of you. How many are in this room because you just want to network with people? Right? Okay, there's a few. More of you should have raised your hands in that one, by the way. That's how you generate wealth. We don't do this alone. You need a team, so get your team together. How many of you are in this room because you think getting into real estate is the best way to get rich quick? No hands. Yay! Oh, Jason. All right. How many of you are in this room because you think this is where all the cool kids hang out? Yeah, okay. So, my feeling is that probably, well, let me ask you one more question. How many of you came here this week, you spent your time and you invested, not spent, invested your time and your dollars to be here because your sole purpose was to focus on your legacy? Ooh, there are more hands than I thought. Sole purpose, just legacy. You really wanted to know about legacy. Okay. Well, what I was going to say is I don't think anybody's here to talk about that except me, but I'm really glad to see a few hands in there. So back to the legacy with a capital L, why was my brain struggling to do just financial legacy? Well, it was really struggling. In fact, it was screaming at me that legacy is so much bigger than financial legacy. And it was telling me that the real legacy with a capital L is not what you leave to people, it's what you leave in people. That's an aha moment to me. When I first had that thought, I'm having it now, chill bumps ran down my body. It's not what you leave to people, it's what you leave in people. That is the legacy we should all be trying to create. And there's a great quote by somebody named Shannon Alder that says, and I love this one, I'm going to put it on my wall somewhere, leave your name on hearts, not on tombstones. Leave your name on hearts, not on tombstones. I think that's just incredibly powerful to think about, that if we wake up every day and think of our legacy as leaving something in people and leaving our name on their hearts, then I think that's incredibly powerful. I personally believe that that concept of legacy with a capital L starts well before our death. In fact, I think that seed of our personal legacy starts as soon as we are fully functioning adults. Our legacy has to do in very large part with how we live our lives and the choices we make every single day. Not just how much wealth we leave to people, how much we accumulate and then leave when we die, right? So back to the legacy. Sorry, I got to get down where I was. When we're talking about legacy, most people, I do think of legacy as the money and the stuff that you leave. Or maybe they think about famous people who left their names on football stadiums, or made some fancy invention. Maybe it's Benjamin Franklin or Abraham Lincoln or, Elon Musk or, Steve Jobs or somebody. Even the dictionary, Webster's Dictionary, in my opinion, has a too limited definition of legacy. Its primary definition of legacy is a gift by will, especially of money or other personal property. That seems way too limited to me with what I'm thinking about today, but I think that's the most common way that people think of it. The second definition in the dictionary is something transmitted by or received from an ancestor or a predecessor from the past, such as a legacy of the ancient philosophers. See, they jump to the bigness again. It doesn't have to be big, right? It doesn't have to be big. I think that second definition is closer to the mark for me, but still just not quite right. And the word legacy actually comes from the Latin word legatus, which one of the meanings of legatus is ambassador or envoy. And I think that if you follow that line of thought, your legacy is your ambassador or your envoy into the future, right? When you're no longer on earth. It's your imprint on the future. It's that unique essence of you perpetuated after your death. That's really what legacy is, your ambassador or your envoy in the future. It's that thing that takes your message to the next generation and to the world, right? It's not just for billionaires, philosophers, or famous people. And we always hope that, that we as a people will leave a good legacy. But keep in mind, as I talk today, that legacies can be bad, too. So we want to think about that. So does your legacy really matter? Does it matter whether you have a legacy? I think it does. You may or may not, but I think it does. If we think about it, life is short. We're born, we grow up, we make our way in the world as best as we can, and then we die. Along the way, we make certain choices, or certain choices are made for us, and maybe we don't realize we have the power to change those choices that are made for us. I certainly didn't think I had the power to change certain choices, right? We start out, of course, as young children, learning from our parents, figuring out who we are and what we should do based on the role models that we see. We eventually, hopefully, graduate from high school. We may or may not go to college. We get jobs. We start our own business, maybe both. We often get married and have children. We may get divorced. I did. We may get remarried. I did. We may live in the same hometown our whole life, or we may travel the world frequently. But at the end of our life, I imagine that all of us, regardless of what our situation was, will feel that life went by in the blink of an eye. Anybody feel that way? And of course, it gets faster as we get older. In the blink of an eye, life will go by. And that we are so busy just trying to get everything done, create that wealth, raise our kids, run around, that we'd never really stop to focus on the legacy that we were creating every day as we made these decisions. So regardless of the path that we take during our lives, there will be some of us who live relatively unconsciously when it comes to our legacy. Some of us will take each day as it comes without much thought or planning about much of anything, much less our legacy, right? Others will live life very intentionally, will set amazing goals, they'll plan it out, they'll work towards those goals every day. I aspire to be one of those people, by the way. But I suspect even those people who have their act together and have their planner and make their goals and work towards them every day aren't really setting goals specifically for the legacy that they're going to be living. That legacy with a capital L. And I did say living, not leaving. And so regardless of whether we specifically set goals for our legacy, I do suspect that each one of us in this room wants our life to matter. We want our life to matter, right? We want to feel at the end of our life that our life mattered to someone, right? We want to know that someone will miss us when we're gone. In fact, my guess is that we probably don't fear the actual act of death itself, but we probably fear that no one will notice if we're gone, right? That's what I fear. Will my kids care if I'm no longer along, or is I just that annoying mother and hey, now I left them some money, rah, rah, right? Jackson, I'm talking to you back there. Okay. All right. I suspect that each of us wants to believe that someone is better off in their life because we were in their life, and maybe a whole bunch of people are better off because we were in the world and we accomplished something really wonderful. And I imagine it really is a rare person, a rare person who truly doesn't care if their life mattered to anyone else, who doesn't care if the years of their existence really meant nothing after they were gone. And if we thought that our time on earth would mean absolutely nothing to anyone after we die, I suspect we would probably live our life very differently. In fact, it really makes me wonder that those people that I consider truly evil in the world somehow have missed out on that part of human nature that cares what people think after they're gone or cares what they think during life. I mean, how can you be, a horrible criminal, or I'm not even going to describe anything, you guys have imaginations. How can you be that type of person if you cared about your life mattering to other people? I don't think you can. I think they missed that gene somewhere. So legacy is the way we leave a part of our essence, our being, and our soul in this mortal world once we've left its earthly planes, right? We're no longer here, but our legacy is here. And I don't think that legacy should be an afterthought or something we just assume will happen. I think we have to consciously go after it by the way we live every single day. Because every decision can affect our legacy, every decision. And legacy doesn't have to come from some lofty goal that people think is only reserved for famous people or philosophers or whatever, or people who make massive contributions to society, like Thomas Edison inventing the light bulb. Legacy can be that, but it can be far simpler, right? Every single person in this room is creating some sort of legacy right now. Think to yourself, am I creating a good one or a bad one? Right? What are you doing? So let's talk about, and I'm just going to throw some examples out there. And I do get a little wordy, so I apologize. But these are things that really, when I sat down and thought about this, I thought, these things could all be somebody's legacy. And they may not seem like a big deal at the time, but they really are legacy. Legacy could be something you did in life that at the time did not seem like a big deal. It could be something that maybe meant something to one person, you thought, just one person, and you didn't really think about it that much. But that one person, that act will be remembered by that one person. And that one person will let other people know and will pass that memory down to their next generation or to their friends if you've done something important. Think about someone who hid Anne Frank in the attic in the Holocaust. All right, think about, or any Jewish person that was saved from Nazi concentration camps. You think that one act meant something to that person and potentially saved generations of that family? Do you think that person probably passed that memory of that rescuer down to the next generation? I think so. I think those children of the person that was hidden probably honored that memory for generations to come. Legacy could be something you wrote or are writing. It could be something far-reaching like Maya Angelou's poetry or Stephen King novels or something like that. Or it could be as simple as a text message or an email to a friend on the day that he or she was in really rough shape. And that text or email made that person feel loved and kept them from committing suicide that day. We don't know what's going on in somebody's life in any given moment. And maybe we reach out to someone, I haven't heard from so-and-so in a while. I wonder what's going on. And you send that person a simple text or an email letting them know you're thinking about them, you love them. And you know what? That message may have kept them from committing suicide, but it probably wasn't just one life that text or email saved. If they had children, you just gave those children their parent that they would not have had if that parent committed suicide. So now you've affected the lives of a whole other generation who grow up in a healthy home with loving parents instead of wondering why their mom or dad felt the need to check out of the world and leave those children behind, right? So that one simple message could be quite the legacy. Excuse me. A legacy could be something you taught someone that helps them grow in their life, which in turn allows them to help others. So think about teaching, you guys, a lot of contractors in the room, think about teaching a young person construction, and that young person then volunteers their time with Habitat for Humanity and helps build homes for underprivileged families. Could be that you instilled the love of reading in a child by reading to them every day, even if it's 15 minutes, and then that child becomes an author or becomes a teacher and shares his or her talents with others. And for those of you in this room, you could create a legacy by mentoring the younger real estate investors that are in this room, right? How many of you have 15 minutes a day to give someone a great piece of advice or take them on a job site with you? Show them how you do a flip. Walk them through a virtual wholesaling. Help somebody who really wants to do the right thing and create wealth and a legacy for their life. Legacy could be a piece of art that inspires someone or brings joy to their day. You never know that the memory of your creation may help someone get through a rough time, or just makes them remember a really wonderful outing with their elderly mother in a coffee shop that happened to feature your art. And they admired it. They're having coffee. They're saying, wow, look at that beautiful picture. You got a cool sculpture. Man, that's awesome. That you just created a memory because you put yourself out there in the world and put a piece of art out there for someone. Shared appreciation of your artwork could bring two people together who create a whole new life together. Right? You never know. You just never know. Of course, your legacy could be a charitable donation to an organization near and dear to your heart, or it could be volunteering time. Your donation to an animal shelter may keep a lot of puppies and kittens off the street, so to speak, and keep them from starvation and disease because you help fund a spay and neuter clinic. Doesn't take a whole lot. Or maybe you go to the animal shelter, maybe you don't have a lot of money to donate, but you go and you donate your time and you help them clean kennels and you help them walk the dogs and things like that. That's a legacy in my mind. So legacy could be as simple as providing something of yourself in companionship, right? Maybe it's providing respite care to a couple with a special needs child who really needs a date night, but they can't afford to get out. And you go spare them, for 4 or 5 hours and let them go out, or a weekend, or whatever. I happen to know someone who just did a little respite care recently and did a really great job. You could be the person who brightens the day of a senior citizen in a nursing home. You go over, you take them for a walk in the garden, read a book. Maybe it's just the simple, amiable companionship of sitting with someone who doesn't have any family nearby and they're all alone. So all these things are pretty simple, but they can be your legacy. What about planting an organic garden that helps regenerate some of our dead soil that's been monocropped to death, right? That we're now going to try to help provide more nutrients for our whole world by regenerating some soil. Or donating those organic vegetables to a food bank and let people who don't have money to buy organic at a grocery store eat a little healthier. Maybe, speaking of healthy, your legacy is modeling a healthy life to your children, to others, your coworkers. Being healthy yourself and inspiring others to be healthy. I think that's a legacy because that will track down, right? Have you ever seen families in a grocery store and you see one family that all looks really fit and active, mom, dad, kids? See another family in the grocery store and they can barely walk and they've got Cheetos and full-fledged Coke in their cart and all that, and you're like, that's a tale of two different families right there. So what's the healthy family? What's the legacy in that family down generations? What's the legacy in the family with Cheetos and Coke. And I'm not picking on Cheetos and Coke. I happen to eat them occasionally myself. But just think about that as a legacy. Maybe it's Jim's legacy, bringing a network of people together who want to help each other succeed. I think this is an amazing legacy that Jim has put together here, this community and this mentorship. And of course, you can go on mission trips. You can help bring clean water. You can start a free pantry or a free library in your neighborhood for people who can't afford things. And maybe it starts out something really small and unimportant. Like I'm at the grocery store. Maybe I see say a woman walking down the aisle, and I'm just being friendly. I just give her a smile. It doesn't mean anything to me. I'm just being nice. Hey, hello, how's your day? Well, maybe that smile and that quick hello changed the entire direction of her day, which meant she didn't go home and yell at her children. She didn't make snarky comments to her husband, which meant that her family felt loved and cherished and went about their day happy and smiling at others, which made others feel loved and kept them smiling. And it all started because I smiled at somebody because, hey, I'm in a good mood. Hey, how's it going? You never know. You never know. And that example brings to mind one of my favorite quotes by Maya Angelou, and I had it on a big chalkboard for years at my house and in my law office. You guys probably heard this one, right? People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. People will never forget how you made them feel. Wouldn't the world be a better place if we all focused on making everyone feel a little bit better, everybody we encounter? What a legacy that would be. We got a whole big positive energy uplifting through the world because we made somebody feel better every day, and then they made somebody feel better, and so on and so on. So for this group particularly, legacy could be, if you've got a great business, bring your kids into the business and teach them how to create their own wealth. Don't just hand them generational wealth when you die. Hey, here's my estate plan, you got $1 million. Teach them how to do it. How many of you have heard that adage, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations? Anybody heard that? It's a great adage. And what it really personifies or describes the inability of grandchildren to manage wealth that was passed down from the grandparents to the parents of the grandchildren. So the grandparents started, shirt sleeves rolled up, working hard. That's what this means. They worked really hard. They made millions of dollars. They just left that to their children without really teaching them to be stewards of the money or to grow their own money or to learn how to do it. So those kids were spoiled. And then they didn't have the lessons to teach to the next kid, and so all the money is all of a sudden gone by the 3rd generation, and that 3rd generation's rolling their sleeves back up because they got to go back to work, right? So shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. So maybe your legacy is teaching the next generation how to be good stewards of the money and how to make their own money. And if you don't do that, it's probably a disservice to your family. This next one I think is tough for me sometimes to think about, but how about a legacy of fostering a child? Or adopting a child, right? A lot of times, children who are in the foster system come from families with negative, bad patterns, child abuse, drug abuse, alcohol abuse. And if you can provide even one child a loving home and teach them to love themselves and those around them, you stand a really good chance of breaking a generations-long negative pattern and changing not only the life of that child, but the life of all the generations below them. And maybe those negative patterns aren't in somebody else's family. Maybe those negative patterns were in your family. Maybe you were raised in a tough situation. Child abuse, drug abuse, racism, hatred, intolerance, lack of education, all these things that tend to hold people back. And if that was your family, then maybe your legacy can be stopping that pattern in its tracks and doing a 180. Flip those negative patterns around and have your children know something different than that. So I think that's a really powerful thing to think about, that you think about, I feel like right now there's a lot of hatred and divisiveness in our world. I mean, just look at Facebook, for goodness sakes. People arguing with each other. There's a lot of bad stuff going on in our world. But the hatred and divisiveness really bothers me, and I don't think that children are born that way. They don't know that. They're taught that. They're taught that. So that their legacy that they've gotten from someone else is hatred, intolerance, racism, whatever it is. And my wish is for everybody who's a parent to teach their children, as their legacy, to teach their children love and intolerance, and tolerance, not intolerance, love and tolerance for those who don't look like or think like them. For everybody, really, but particularly those that don't look like or think like them. They don't have to agree with everything everybody thinks. They just have to tolerate people and be a loving, kind human being. Teach them to seek to understand other people before being understood themselves. What a legacy would that be, right? That'd be a great legacy. Obviously, those are extreme examples, by the way, about child abuse and all that. And there are more innocent negative legacies that I see almost on a daily basis sometimes that bothers me. Maybe a bad legacy is people who spread gossip. I think that's a negative legacy. Bring other people down, talk bad about them. Hey, can you believe? Come on, we don't need to talk like that. And I bet nobody in this room really does. But if you do, stop it. You ever seen Bob Newhart? Stop it. Just stop it. Don't do that. That makes you look bad anyway. So people who constantly put other people down, see the worst in people, I just think that's a negative legacy, and we should all stop it if we're doing that. And I think Eleanor Roosevelt nailed it, and you guys probably have heard this one, when she said, great minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, and small minds discuss people. Great minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, and small minds discuss people. Don't be a small mind. So are there any negative legacies in your life that need to be changed? I know in my life there were. I needed to change, and I didn't realize it probably till it was too late. When I got divorced, I had been a stay-at-home mom. I'd been a lawyer for many years, and I was a stay-at-home mom. My kids were 5, 8, and 11, so Jackson was only 5 when I got divorced. And I needed to go back to work. I was just now a single mom. So I started my own law firm because thinking that would give me lots of more time to spend with my children. What a joke that was. You run your own business. Who has more time running their own business than they would working 9 to 5 for someone else? Absolutely no one, unless they have no business. So I think my negative legacy was, even though I tried to be there for my kids, and I went to all the parent-teacher conferences and the sports games and all that, but I probably worked too hard. I was probably a bit of a workaholic, and I thought I needed to, but I probably could have figured out how to spend more time with my kids and my family. So that was a negative legacy that I didn't change because I didn't realize it at the time. So I think back about it, and it's just little things like that. So I think every person in this room has the power, with really very little effort, to live an amazing legacy and make the world a better place just by them being in it. There's not one person in this room that cannot make the world a better place just because you exist and live in this world. You can make it a bad place, but it's not going to be just because you exist. So how do you know what legacy you actually are creating? Right? What legacy you're creating right now? There's several ways to get you thinking about that. And I didn't make these up, by the way, but they resonated with me. The first one's a little bit morbid, but write your own obituary based on the life you're living today. Based on the life you're living today. Sit down, write it out. What does it say about you? Do you like it? Do you like what it says? If you don't like it, rewrite it by changing the way you live. And every time you make a change, write a new obituary. Is it better now? Is it better now? Keep changing your life and rewriting that obituary until it says, until it describes the person you want to be remembered as. Kind of a morbid example. And if you don't like that morbid example, then use the one Stephen Covey said. He wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Pretend it's your 80th birthday party. I'm getting closer to that every day, it feels like. And all the people that you have positively impacted in your life have shown up to your birthday party. So everybody you've made a positive impact on is there. How many people are there? What would they say about you in their toast? Is it a sad and lonely party? Is there nobody that showed up? Or is it a massive, lively party with the best people on the planet who are there to celebrate you because they feel so blessed that you're in their life? So think about who would show up. And if you need a little push every day to live your best legacy, make a vision board of that party. Cut out pictures from Facebook of your little friends and put them up there. Who's going to be in that picture? What are they doing? Are they excited? Or are they like, I can't believe I have to be here, right? Anyway, so how can we each make a more conscious effort to live our legacy every day? Once you've decided what it is and you want to change it, or maybe you just want more of the same, I think the first thing you have to do is decide what your core values are, right? Your core values are your highest priorities, your most deeply held beliefs that are the fundamental driving forces in your life. Those are your core values. They're the heart of what you personally stand for in this world. Think of things that you can do every day that would be a living embodiment to those core values, and do those things. Just do it, right? Use your core values to write your personal mission statement. It's kind of like a business. We're like treating ourselves as a business because our legacy could be thought of that way. So your personal mission statement explains how you plan to pursue your purpose and why it matters so much to you. Once you have your personal mission statement, set your daily, weekly, and monthly goals based on that personal mission statement. Who you want to be in the world, what legacy you want to leave. It's not just your business goals, it's your personal goals too. And make daily decisions within the framework of that statement. And I want you to ask yourself, every time you're considering taking an action, ask yourself, does this action I am considering taking contribute to or contaminate my core values, and my personal mission statement. Does this contribute to or contaminate? Does this action contribute to or contaminate my desired legacy? And don't do the things that don't contribute. Don't do the things that contaminate. Do the things that contribute. And at the end of each day, I want you to ask yourself this. How did people experience me today? How did I make them feel? How will they remember me? How do I think they'll remember me? How did I make them feel? So if you're having a bad day and you snark at somebody all day and you really probably were a little mean, they're probably not going to feel that great about you, right? So, but then there's the opposite. So think about how you made them feel. One moment, one thought, one action, one idea can change the course of your life or someone else's life. Excuse me. What is one thing that you can think of that changed the course of your life? Was it good or bad? What's one thing that you may have said or done that changed the course of someone else's life, and was that good or bad? Spend some time thinking about this. Take a day, take a personal retreat day, and think about these things. To perhaps inspire you to think of ways you might change the trajectory of someone else's life, I want to tell you the story of a man, excuse me, that in my opinion truly lived his legacy better than anyone on earth I've ever known. Jim Ingersoll might be close second. So this man was kind, he was thoughtful, he was caring, he was quiet and unassuming. He lived a life of quiet philanthropy and civic leadership. And although he made a difference in the lives of many, he never sought that limelight, and he never felt the need to be honored by others, although he so often was. If you met this man in a casual encounter, you would have no idea the depth of his amazing generosity of spirit, time, and money. He would never have told you about the many things he did for his family, his friends, his employees, his neighbors, his community, his state. But any encounter with him would leave you feeling better. Oh, thank you. Oh, you're so good. Thank you, dear. Thank you. It's hard with this bottle. I don't know, I'm getting a little frog in my throat, but anyway, any encounter with this man would leave you feeling better than you did before you met him. 100% of the time. 100% of the time. This man's name was Bill Stambach, and he was my stepfather. He's my stepfather. I'm going to cry. Jack, I told you I wouldn't cry, but I'm about to. He died in 2018 at the age of 95. His brother, by the way, his older brother, is still alive and is now about 103, I think. Anyway, Bill's memorial service was held in the largest church in our hometown, Salisbury, North Carolina. Almost 1,000 people packed into that church a mere 3 days after his death to honor a man who meant so much to them and to their town. More people were gathered outside on the sidewalk. I mean, we couldn't fit everybody in this church, and the church was literally the biggest we could find in the community. His name was on the marquee of 2 local theaters, and his local newspaper ran a full-size front-page article lamenting the loss of Salisbury's angel. He was an absolute angel. Bill would have felt that all that fuss was unnecessary and unwarranted, by the way, because he liked to be quiet about his largesse and the way he treated people. It was always obvious to me that Bill had left an amazing legacy of friendship and civic leadership and philanthropy in his 95 years. I knew that he would be well remembered for all of those things at his service. But I'll never forget this, because on the morning of his memorial service, I wasn't supposed to speak. It's just my older stepsister who was going to speak. But I woke up with the realization that the legacy that Bill Stambach left in me was far more than any of those things, this friendship and civic leadership. And it was a legacy that not only changed the course of my life, it changed the course of my children's lives, my stepchildren's lives, my siblings' lives, their children's lives. It changed so many lives on a personal level that nobody even knew about or thought about. And it wasn't the money. It wasn't the fact that he supported my mom and us as we were growing up. It wasn't that. But, and I hesitated to write this part, but I think it's important. Before I talk more about Bill's legacy, I want to give you a little bit of backstory. My biological father, who's still alive, was a doctor. And I was born just as he was entering medical school. And during the first 10 years of my life, he just wasn't around very much because he was in medical school and doing internships and fellowships and all the things that you do. And I don't have a whole lot of memories of him at all from the ages of 0 to 10. I have a few, but not very many. When I was 10, in 1973, my father accepted a job at a private medical practice in Salisbury and moved our family there. And I finally got to see more of him because he was working a regular job. It was great, but it was a good relationship, but it wasn't the best, but he was around. My parents bought a large farm out in the country, and we spent the next 2 years riding horses, swimming in the lake, picking figs. That was really cool. And it was paradise to me because I was a 12-year-old girl who loved riding horses more than anything in the world. That was my entire life. How many 12-year-old girls feel that way? half the population, right? Anyway, this was a beautiful 472-acre farm on the Yadkin River in Rowan County, North Carolina. It was drop-dead gorgeous. And for any of you who have read any of my brother's books, by the way, which one was it? His second book, Downriver, was set on this, basically on this property. So you can read it and read about the farm. But in any event, my parents were getting ready to build a house sitting up on a gorgeous hill overlooking the lake and the river. And all I wanted to do was be a big animal vet. How many of you in here have read James Herriot's All Creatures Great and Small and that whole series? Anybody? Was I the only weirdo? Okay. You guys horse riders or big animal lovers when you were growing up? Yeah, well, great series. And in any event, my whole dream was to be a big animal veterinarian, to live on that farm the rest of my life, to ride horses till I died and all that. Unfortunately, that dream was shattered on the first day in September 1975, and I'll remember that day like it was yesterday, when my father just up and left town in the middle of the night. Just left. He didn't say goodbye to anybody. We were all sleeping. He just left. Disappeared with my mother's best friend. Disappeared. We didn't hear from him for 6 months, and only then when my mom's private detective found him, right? So he abandoned us. We had no idea where he was. And I loved my father. I do love him, and I have very little contact with him, though, over the last 46 years. I'm 58 now. I was 12 at the time. I see him, every few years. We talk twice a year, maybe on birthdays and holidays. That's not much. So what legacy do you think was created in the mind of a small 12-year-old girl? Actually, I was never small. I was probably already over 5 feet. But anyway, I was 12. I was young. I wasn't small. So what legacy do you think was created in my young mind when my parent, one of the people who's supposed to love you more than anything in the whole world, who's got your back, who's never going to leave you, disappears? Not just divorces your mom and says, I love you, hey, I'm just moving down the block, we'll see you, every week. Not that. This person just freaking disappeared from our lives. Disappeared. Well, what do you think that legacy was for me? Those choices that my father made, and I'm sure he had his reasons, created a legacy of abandonment, uncertainty, and a struggle to believe that I was worthy of love, right? I still struggle with those things to a degree. Ask anybody who knows me well. It's not a good legacy at all. So luckily for me and for my kids and the rest of my family, my mother met Bill, my soon-to-be stepfather, 3 years after my father left our family. And the course of my life changed forever. Honestly, as a 15-year-old girl, I did not see what my mom saw in Bill. He was short, bald, and 16 years older than she was, and he looked like Ziggy in the cartoon characters. Those of you who are old enough know exactly what I'm talking about, right? By the way, I need to point out, and you'll meet this person later, but Laurie Barwick, please stand up. Just raise your hand back there. That is Laurie Barwick. I knew her first as Laurie Lomax. She is the first person I met when my family moved us to Salisbury when I was 10. And I was lonely. I was scared to go to a new school that was starting right around the corner. And she just popped around in my backyard when I was 10, and here we are, 48 years later, still best friends. So Laurie is here with me, and you'll find out why later. Anyway, so I wanted to point out Laurie because she knows Bill well, and she was there when my mom was dating Bill, and I'm sure I was like, oh my God, what is up with this guy? I mean, in fact, my mom had been engaged to a guy who was younger than her, gorgeous, and owned a skating rink in Portland, Oregon. He was cool, right? He was cool. Who was this dude? I mean, come on. Anyway, we were supposed to move to Portland, but we didn't, and you'll hear more about that in a minute. Anyway, my mom was 39 when they got married, and Bill was 55. I thought he was freaking ancient because I was only 15. I was like, I did not see the allure of what my mother was doing. Luckily, she did not take dating advice from me. So, the very first lesson in Bill's amazing legacy to me was never to judge a book by its cover. You might look like Ziggy, but you're the best thing that ever happened in my life. So, over the next 40 years, I learned so much from Bill through his words and by his example. Bill taught me to be gracious and humble, to give of myself, but never to give away myself. That was a huge one. Give of myself, but never give away myself, to value all that I am. He taught me that I am indeed worthy of love and that not all men abandon their families in the middle of the night. What a great legacy that was for a 12-year-old. I was 15 at the time. But that was probably his most important legacy to me, but it certainly was not his only one. There are so very many stories of the quiet stories of how Bill selflessly helped others in so many ways while always remaining gracious and humble himself. He was honored publicly for many of his contributions, but it was the quiet things that he did that no one knew about, excuse me, that meant the most to me. It was the private pensions he paid for life to each and every person who ever worked in our household. Who does that? You have somebody who comes to clean for you on a regular basis? When they were old enough to retire, my stepfather paid them a private pension for the rest of their life, every single one. Didn't tell a soul, I found out years later. It was the full payment of college tuition for underprivileged students so they could all attain college degrees. He gave a lot of those scholarships. It was his advocacy and his financial support for colleges whose students were mostly people of color. And remember, this was a long time ago in the South that he started this. That was a courageous act. It was his support of the LGBTQ movement in a small southern town. Bill never shied away from doing what he felt was the right thing, regardless of what anyone thought, and to me, that's a huge, huge legacy. His private philanthropy, undertaken for no other reason than to help a fellow human being, is a truly magnificent legacy. It wasn't that hard for him to do. The financial piece might have been hard for some people, but he gave so much more than money. He gave so much of his time. He was on the board of directors of a little tiny college in the mountains of North Carolina for 50 years. 50, 5-0, on the board of trustees for 50 years. Gave of his time selflessly. And before I pick up the rest of the story, I really feel like I need to tell you kind of a funny story about Bill, because I really want you to understand how much he really wanted people to feel good about themselves. Like I said, Bill was this short little bald man that looked like Ziggy. And he had been the mayor of our town, and he was, financially well off. We lived in a big house on a hill in the country club subdivision right on the corner. And because we're at the intersection of two busy streets, right at a stop sign, people would often throw their garbage out of their car windows, ended up on the bottom of our driveway or on the yard. So, and when Bill used to go running, and at this point he was probably in his 70s, and he was very frugal. Remember that don't overspend? Bill never overspent, even though he could have. He would go running in his most threadbare pair of khakis rolled up to his knees, with his threadbare black business socks that he no more wore to work, a nice pair of running shoes, because that was important for his feet, the most threadbare, sweat-stained button-down that he would tie at his waist. I'm not kidding you, it was a picture. And an old Mariners baseball cap was totally sweat-stained, and he'd go out jogging around the neighborhood. And so one day, he's jogging, and he comes back, and he's walking up to our driveway. And he sees all these aluminum cans. And back in the South, I don't know if they still do that, you can turn in cans and get money, right? Well, he's just trying to clean up our yard. So Bill, dressed like Bill, he's leaning down, he's picking up cans. He's just going to take them to the house and throw them away, right? Well, this car pulls up and assumes that Bill is homeless and collecting cans to make money. I mean, it's right there under the big giant White House, the country club subdivision. And they're like, "Here you go, buddy." And they just start shoveling like 30 cans out. And he's like, "Thank you so much. Thank you. That's so thoughtful." And he waited till they drove off, and they took like 5 trips to get him back up to the house and throw him away. That's Bill. He would never say, "Dude, I live in that house up there. You think I need your cans?" No, never would he do that. All right, so back to the morning of his funeral. Like I said, I was not supposed to speak at his service, but when I woke up in my hotel room that morning, I knew there was a story of Bill and a story of his legacy that needed to be told. So without even getting out of bed, I grabbed my computer and I started typing. Literally, those words flew out of my fingers and onto the pages as if God was writing him himself. I never edited, not once. Not one word got edited. So I want to read you some of what I wrote, and I want to thank you for indulging me in a little bit of this personal story, but I want you to be inspired by this man, and what I wrote about him, that God wrote about him, I think, really gives you a glimpse into the finest legacy builder I've ever known. So I hope his legacy inspires some of you in the way that's inspired me. And again, I thank you for indulgence and letting me talk about him. So after I introduced myself at his service to literally 1,000 people, plus I don't even know if they had speakers outside, but there was a lot of people. This is what I said, and I'm just going to read it so you get the whole thing. I said, "I'm sure all of you here are aware of the many ways in which Bill gave to his community as a civic leader, philanthropist, church member, mentor, and all-around amazing man. But I wanted to speak today to honor Bill for perhaps a lesser-known way that he changed lives and gave of himself. I'm speaking today to acknowledge and honor Bill for his presence in my life, the lives of my mother, my sister, my brother, my children, and my brother's children. I was 15 years old when my mother married Bill Stambach. Some of you may remember that before Mom and Bill started dating, Mom had plans to move our family to Portland, Oregon, and had even purchased a house. But love intervened, and plans changed. We stayed in Salisbury, and Mom and Bill were married in 1979. That change in plans now seems like divine intervention and was one of the most wonderful things that ever happened to my mother, my siblings, and me. I cannot even count the number of times since 1979 that I have thanked God for bringing Bill Stambach into my life. This one was important to me. From day one, Bill welcomed us Hart children into his family and into his life without reservation. If he felt overwhelmed by the addition of 2 teenagers and a preteen into his life, he never showed it to us. He offered us love and guidance, and perhaps most importantly, made our mother happy. I have such fond memories of Mom and Bill dancing and laughing in the kitchen at our house on Clubhouse Drive. His infusion of love into our lives felt to me to be exactly what we needed, and I will be forever grateful for it. As his daughter Ann Stambach recently said to me, Dad embodied the principle that life is not a zero-sum game. There is always enough love to go around. Truer words were never said. For the last 40 years, Bill has treated my siblings and me and our children just like his own children and grandchildren. He never made us feel lesser because we were not born into his family and did not share his last name. He introduced us as his daughter, his son, his grandchild, without the qualifying prefix of step, and that always made me feel loved. Because Bill loved my mother, my brother and sister and I got 3 new siblings, which eventually brought us 3 new sisters-in-law, and our children got 5 additional cousins. We became the Hartbachs, a beautiful blending of Harts and Stambachs. And in 40 years of a large blended family, there's never been one falling out or incident of discord between anyone. Seems a little bit like a miracle to me, but I credit Mom and Bill for teaching us all to be good people. I love our large family, and I would not trade it for the world. Bill's love was only one of the many blessings I received from him, and I truly believe that I'm the person I am today and have a life full of blessings, in large part because of the lessons I learned from Bill. By thought, word, and deed, Bill taught me to seek to understand before being understood, to always allow a person to save face if there is a need to confront them for any reason, to be respectful of all people, all races, all religions, all cultures, all sexualities, and all opinions, to be generous and support causes that are important to me, to be humble and gracious, to be adventurous, not to make myself lesser than I am regardless of what anyone else thinks. By the way, it's none of my business what any of you think of me. I had to learn that lesson the hard way. That I can agree to disagree and love others that think or feel differently than I do. That a good education and a good work ethic are important. In turn, and this is where legacy comes in turn, I have tried to teach my children these things, and hopefully they will teach their children, and Bill's legacy will live on through the generations. Bill, along with my mom, gave me the wings to fly and the confidence to know I could take care of myself and my children, all the while letting me know if there was ever a time I needed them, they would be there. Perhaps most of all, Bill taught me to greet every person and every experience with grace and with a completely open and inquiring mind, because you never know where you might meet your next friend, partner, spouse, teacher, or mentor, and you never know when God will bring you a whole new family that will enrich and change your life and the lives of your children forever. Okay. In an ironic twist of fate, and this was written 4 years ago, in an ironic twist of fate, life has come full circle. And I now find myself at almost the same age Bill was when he married my mom, getting remarried to a wonderful man with 3 adult children. I found my very own Bill Stambach to dance and laugh with in the kitchen. And as I create new relationships with my soon-to-be stepchildren, I'm often reminded of Bill Stambach and the way he created beautiful relationships with my siblings and me. I know I will be a better stepmom because of Bill's legacy of love. And my stepdaughter, who I just call my daughter, Taryn, is in the room. Taryn, wave everybody. And because of me, Taryn is here and becoming a real estate investor, so that's part of my legacy to my family, and it's because of Bill. Anyway, what a beautiful ripple effect. So that was the end of my talk at the funeral, and I cannot tell you how many people came up to me after the service to thank me for sharing Bill's less public legacy with them and giving them that glimpse into how seemingly small things could mean so much to so many. So in a nutshell, here's my theory about legacy. I believe that if we focus every day on living and creating our legacy, everything else we want out of life will follow without really having to think about it. We'll be healthy, we will be financially secure, we will be respected, we will have great relationships with our family, friends, and colleagues. We will feel fulfilled. We will leave the world a better place and will stamp the essence of our soul onto the future. At the end of life, what really matters is not what we bought, but what we built, not what we got, but what we shared, not our competence, but our character, and not our success, but our significance. My call to action for all of us is to live a life that matters, live a life of love, and live a life of legacy. Thanks for listening.
right.